The young and the restless spoilers shocked Diane paced the length of her lavish Genoa City living room, her heels clicking against the marble floor in a staccato of anxiety. Martin's incarceration weighed heavily on her mind. He was supposed to be her unwavering ally, the instrument of her revenge against Phyllis Summers. Yet here he sat, behind bars, with secrets she had never intended to reveal. Every passing minute seemed to echo with the threat that Martin, in his desperation, might spill the truth of their conspiracy. As Diane replayed the events in her mind, she recalled the simmering rivalry between herself and Phyllis. The two women had danced a delicate waltz of envy and one-upmanship for years, sly insults at charity luncheons, whispered rumors in corporate boardrooms, and the occasional sabotage of a social engagement. But despite their mutual loathing, neither had ever dared to deliver a fatal blow, until now. Driven by her fear of losing everything. Her reputation, her fortune, and the fragile respectability she had clawed back after past scandals, Diane had made a desperate choice. She'd hired Martin, a shadowy fixer with a talent for making problems disappear, to neutralize Phyllis once and for all. Diane's instructions had been clear: scare Phyllis into silence, tarnish her credibility, but stop short of murder. Yet Martin, always eager to seize maximum leverage, had gone further, far further, by abducting Sharon Newman, Phyllis's closest friend and occasional ally, to force Phyllis's hand. Now Diane's heart pounded with dread. If Martin revealed that Diane had ordered the hit, every shred of her social standing would collapse. Jack Abbott, Phyllis's on-again, off-again husband and Diane's most formidable adversary, would relish her downfall. Jack had already warned Diane to stay out of Abbott family affairs. His voice had carried an edge she knew all too well. He would not hesitate to see her utterly ruined if he believed she'd endangered the woman he loved. But would anyone believe Martin's allegations? Diane thought of the sealed envelopes, the hidden bank transfers, the cryptic phone records she'd meticulously covered up. She had been cautious, perhaps too cautious. Martin's arrest for kidnapping Sharon had brought his dealings under police scrutiny, and now investigators were digging into his financials. Every dollar trail led back to Diane's offshore accounts. Night after night, Diane lay awake in her penthouse suite, staring at the ceiling as imagined headlines flashed in her mind: Genoa City socialite behind shocking abduction plot, or Diane Jenkins accused of conspiracy to commit murder. She could see Jack's face, his eyes narrowing in disgust. She pictured Phyllis, frantic with worry for Sharon, perhaps already suspecting Diane's involvement. The thought stung worse than any physical blow. Desperation propelled Diane into action. She needed to control the narrative before Martin could talk. She summoned her most trusted lawyer, a slick, silver-haired barrister named Helen Crawford, who had defended Diane through previous scandals. Over tea in Diane's sunlit study, Helen outlined the peril. "Your fingerprints are not literally on the crime scene," Helen said, tapping her pen thoughtfully against her notebook. "But the prosecution will argue that your payments to Martin constitute a conspiracy. If Sharon or Phyllis testifies that Martin said he acted on your orders, the jury will connect the dots." Diane's lips pressed into a thin line. "We need Martin to plead guilty to a lesser charge, to ensure he never speaks," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. "He must recant any mention of me." Helen sighed. "Martin's already cooperating with investigators. He's looking for a deal. If he flips, you'll be in deeper trouble. Your best hope is to negotiate immunity for Sharon, have her testify that she was part of a misunderstanding, that she and Phyllis had staged a fake kidnapping for publicity. It's absurd, but sensational soap operas thrive on absurdity." Diane frowned at the absurdity of it all. Yet if she could convince Sharon to lie, or at least muddy the waters, perhaps she could sow enough doubt to escape indictment. But why would Sharon, a woman of integrity despite her own complicated past, agree to perjure herself? Diane knew that only one person could persuade her: Phyllis. And Phyllis would never cooperate willingly, unless her own freedom or reputation was at stake. Meanwhile, in the depths of the county jail, Martin sat in a cold cell, plotting his next move. He knew Diane had abandoned him the moment he'd become a liability. Now he held the upper hand. He could trade Diane's secrets for leniency. He smirked, imagining Diane's panic when she realized he wasn't going down alone. Word of Martin's potential testimony began to leak through the grapevine. Rumors swirled in Genoa City's elite circles. At the Genoa City Athletic Club, whispers followed Diane like a shadow. One evening, she overheard two board members speculating over cocktails. "I hear Diane's name came up during Martin's hearing," said one. "They say he's singing like a canary." Panic flared in Diane's chest. She stormed out, her silk gown rustling like a wounded animal's cry. Back home, she penned an urgent note to Phyllis, "We must meet. Lives are at stake." She hesitated before sending it. Would Phyllis even respond? Or would this be the moment her rival finally delivered the coup de grace? Phyllis, meanwhile, was in turmoil of her own. She adored Sharon like a sister, and the news of her abduction had shattered her. Yet she also harbored resentment toward Diane for past betrayals. When Diane's message arrived, Phyllis read it with trembling hands. Was this a trap? Could she trust the woman who had plotted against her? But if Diane truly held information that could free Sharon and clear her name, Phyllis would have no choice but to listen. Under the dim glow of the coffee shop's pendant lights, the two women finally met. Diane's eyes were haunted, Phyllis's were steely. Diane laid out her plan, a joint press conference in which they would spin the kidnapping as a publicity stunt gone awry. They would claim Sharon's disappearance was orchestrated by Phyllis's PR team to drum up sympathy for her latest novel, an outlandish story, but one that might just stick in a town that thrived on melodrama. Phyllis stared at Diane, weighing the offer. She thought of Sharon's tear-stained face, the terror in her voice when she'd called Phyllis from Martin's car. She thought of Jack's fury, his promise to destroy whoever harmed my family. Could she sacrifice her credibility to save Sharon? Could she forge an alliance with the woman who'd long been her nemesis? In that tense silence, both women recognized a harsh truth. In Genoa City, survival often meant forging temporary alliances with sworn enemies. As they clasped hands across the table, they understood that the real enemy was Martin, and the web of deceit he threatened to unravel. Their fates, intertwined by fear and ambition, would now be decided by a precarious pact, one that could either save their lives or destroy them all. Diane had been dreading this meeting for weeks. The weight of her conscience was almost unbearable, and the secret she had carried for so long now demanded to be confessed. As she made her way to the upscale, dimly lit cafe on the outskirts of Genoa City, her heart pounded not only from fear of what was to come, but also from the uncertainty of whether anyone, especially the police or Phyllis, could ever forgive her transgressions. Jack sat at a secluded corner table, a mix of apprehension and sorrow in his eyes as he awaited Diane's arrival. Their relationship had always been a fragile truce between love and suspicion, and although they had shared moments of genuine happiness, the recent chaos had put everything in jeopardy. Jack had grown increasingly unsettled by the mystery surrounding Diane's motives. Why, he wondered, had she been so desperate to rid herself of Phyllis? Had their life together been nothing more than a well-rehearsed facade hiding darker ambitions? When Diane finally stepped into the cafe, she hesitated for a moment in the doorway, as if gathering every ounce of strength to face the man she had come to meet. Her eyes were downcast, and she wore a look of resignation that made Jack's heart ache. Without a word, she slid into the seat opposite him. The silence that fell between them was heavy with unspoken truths. "I need to confess everything, Jack," Diane began, her voice trembling. "I know my actions have put us all in a terrible position. I've done things that I never thought I'd be capable of, things I can't take back." Jack leaned forward, his brow furrowed in confusion and pain. "Diane, why now? After everything, why come clean? And more importantly, why did you want to kill Phyllis? We had a life together that seemed, weren't we happy?" His voice was both incredulous and sorrowful, as if he were questioning the very foundation of the life they had built. Diane's eyes glistened with tears as she met his gaze. I thought that if I eliminated Phyllis, then maybe I could secure our future. But it wasn't about us being happy. It was about control, about protecting myself from the potential fallout. She paused, swallowing hard as the weight of her sins pressed down on her. I feared that if Phyllis lived, if the police or anyone else forgave her, everything I've done would be exposed. The police, or worse, Phyllis herself. They might never forgive the damage I caused. Jack's mind raced. He remembered the days when their love had seemed unbreakable, when they believed that together they could overcome any obstacle. But now, in this stark moment of truth, his inner voice demanded an answer. But what about the consequences? You know how Phyllis sees everything. I've heard she's convinced there's more to Martin's scheme than meets the eye. She believes that Martin wasn't working alone, that behind him was a network of allies prepared for every move we made. Diane nodded slowly, her expression haunted by memories of clandestine phone calls and whispered threats. Yes, Phyllis is not one to be easily deceived. I've seen the way she looks at every detail, every shift in the game. And Martin, he knew exactly what he was doing. He anticipated our moves, our alliances, and he set everything in motion to ensure he could slip away at the first sign of trouble. He's always been one step ahead. Jack's eyes narrowed as he tried to reconcile the image of the woman he loved with the cold, calculating figure before him. So, Martin knew all along what you were planning? That you'd confess, that you'd try to shift the blame? And why would you want to sacrifice Phyllis in all of this? She's been your enemy, yes, but she's also the only person who might have helped save Sharon. Was it ever truly about justice? Diane's voice dropped to a whisper, laden with regret. I was cornered. I believed that if Phyllis lived, if she forgave Martin's betrayal or, worse, covered it up, I'd be left vulnerable. I thought that by removing her from the equation, I could negotiate with the police on my own terms, secure a plea that might allow me to escape the full consequences of my actions. I thought I could frame it as an act of self-defense or a desperate measure taken in the heat of betrayal. Jack shook his head, struggling to grasp the depth of the moral quagmire before him. You think the police, or even Phyllis, will forgive you? You think that confessing now, in the middle of all this chaos, will make anything right? His tone was bitter, as if each word stung more than the last. Diane's eyes pleaded for understanding. It doesn't matter if you forgive me, Jack. What matters is if anyone else will. I fear the wrath of the police if they uncover the true extent of my crimes. And Phyllis, she's not just another adversary. In her mind, she's the moral arbiter of everything that's happened. She's convinced that Martin's escape was not a random act, but part of a larger conspiracy. She believes that behind him, there's a silent partner who knew every move we made. And she will never let me off the hook. Jack's mind flashed back to the early days of their entanglement, when their ambitions had intertwined with passion and ruthlessness. Now, that same ambition had degenerated into a labyrinth of guilt and treachery. Diane, we were supposed to be partners in life. I can't understand why you'd turn on Phyllis in such a drastic way. We were supposed to be building something together, not tearing each other apart. Is our happiness worth all this bloodshed? Diane's silence was her answer, a silence heavy with regret and the bitter taste of lost love. Jack's mind reeled with the implications of her confession. The idea that Phyllis might soon be exacting revenge, that the police might be closing in, and that Martin, ever the puppet master, had set a contingency plan for his escape, filled him with a sense of foreboding he couldn't shake. Outside, the night had begun to drape the city in shadows, mirroring the darkness that had settled into their lives. Jack stared out the window for a long moment, wondering if there was any way back from this precipice of betrayal. The truth was that forgiveness, whether from the police, from Phyllis, or even from himself, seemed as elusive as redemption in a world where every ally could be a hidden enemy. In that quiet, tense space between confession and judgment, Jack's thoughts drifted to the countless moments they had shared, a life that, on the surface, had looked so blissfully normal. But beneath that veneer lay a tangled web of secrets, lies, and unspoken deals. The realization that Diane's desire to confess was not born out of remorse alone but also from a desperate need to control the narrative of her impending downfall made Jack's heart sink even further. "Perhaps," Jack finally said, his voice a mix of sorrow and resignation, "it's not about whether I forgive you. It's about whether anyone can forgive you, or if you can ever forgive yourself." His words hung in the air, the truth of them more damning than any accusation. Diane's eyes, filled with tears and regret, met his. "I have to face what I've done, Jack. Even if it means that the police won't show mercy, or that Phyllis will come after me with every resource at her disposal. I need to believe that there's a chance, however slim, that this can end without destroying everyone involved." But Jack's mind was already racing ahead to the inevitable collision course with Phyllis, who remained convinced that Martin's actions were part of a much larger plan. In her eyes, the possibility that a secret ally was orchestrating events behind the scenes would only drive her further into a vendetta. And if Martin managed to slip away in the chaos, his escape would not just be a personal victory, it would be a final, mocking confirmation that all their efforts were in vain. As the cafe's lights flickered and the last of the evening's patrons trickled out, Jack and Diane sat in a silence that spoke louder than any words. Their shared history, filled with both passion and treachery, now teetered on the edge of a precipice. With the police closing in and Phyllis's suspicions growing by the hour, their future together, once a beacon of hope, was now clouded by uncertainty and regret. Jack wondered if their happiness had ever been real, or if it was all just another elaborate scheme in the endless drama of Genoa City. Diane's confession was not a plea for forgiveness from him, but rather a desperate bid to stave off the vengeance of those who might hold her accountable. In the end, it wasn't about whether Jack could forgive her, it was about whether the forces gathering against her, the relentless police inquiry and Phyllis's unyielding sense of justice, would allow any redemption at all. Their fate now hung in the balance, suspended between a past filled with deceit and a future that promised nothing but further turmoil. And as Diane and Jack sat together in that lonely cafe, the question that loomed large was not simply about forgiveness. It was about survival, in a world where trust had become the rarest and most dangerous currency of all.